What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to What If Deku Had Black Air Force Energy. Yep, these ideas just keep getting more and more lackluster. Karen, yep, come here. You need to start coming up with better ideas, dude. The fans are gonna stop clicking on this stuff. Wait, we're rolling. Cut the camera.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Okay, so we start our story off with Deku in the back of the class on the day of the Sludge villain incident. See, this is when Deku will basically just be in the back chilling. Deku would basically be leaning back in his chair with his earbuds in, not really giving a F. And by AF, I mean AF, you know, you guys can put that together. Many of you guys can put that together, I hope. But if you can't, you probably shouldn't even be on the video in the first place. That being said, Deku, as I said, would basically just be on some I don't care attitude, and Deku would just be leaning back in his chair at the back of the class. It's at this point that the teacher would basically walk into the classroom, examine the area, see Deku in the back, and just be like, well, the usual. As he would basically walk inside, he would set his stuff down and tell everybody to quiet down. This is when he would basically tell everybody about, you know, what they want to do in their futures, and everybody would kind of start being like, well, we don't know. This is when the teacher would look at them and the classroom would basically quiet down as he would say, all right, well, since you guys don't know, I guess I'm gonna have to hand out these career aptitude tests. As the kid would be like, oh, come on. And then he would be like, just kidding, I know you all want to become heroes. And he would throw the papers in the air, causing for all the people in the class to basically start using their quirks like crazy. This is when Deku would basically just lift his head up a little bit and acknowledge that everybody's just going crazy with their quirks, and Deku would lay his head back as he would continue to basically lean back in his chair. Deku would then start smirking a little bit, as it's at this point that the teacher would say something that Deku did not want to be said public. The teacher would then say, Bakugo, looks like you want to go to the national school. To which Bakugo would have his usual bravado, and Deku would be at the class just kind of smirking, thinking that that kid wants to get into UA. His quirk isn't even a flashy kind, and he can whoop Bakugo in a second. That being said, he would then smirk a little bit, and this is when the teacher would say something that would kind of piss Deku off. He would say, oh, Midoriya, you also want to go to UA. Kind of a shocker, isn't it? As the rest of the class would look at Deku, they would go silent, as Deku would look at the teacher and give him a glare. As the teacher would kind of back up a little bit, he would then say that he didn't mean to invade his privacy, but you know, he just noticed it. And Deku would say, well, maybe you shouldn't have said anything at all. As the teacher would just be like, alright, sorry Izuku, but you know, you can't do anything about it. Deku would then be like, yeah, you sure about that? And the teacher would then be like, alright, anyways guys, so let's start class. As everybody would basically calm down a little bit, except this is when Bakugo would be like, look at you, Izuku. You want to go into the national school with a record like that? You won't be going anywhere with a sorry excuse. For a sorry excuse of a hero. As Deku would look at Bakugo, this is when Deku would have a slight chuckle go down his face, as Deku would then look at Bakugo and say, that's rich coming from a bully like you as well as a terrorist. Look at your quirk, Kachan. You have nothing. Look at that. This entire time that I've been here, you've been doing nothing but berating kids and using that quirk of yours to cause harm to others. Doesn't seem so hero-like now, does it? As Bakugo would quiet down a little bit, grit his teeth, and ball his fist up, as he would then look at Deku with a glare. Deku would then give Bakugo a stare, which just makes Bakugo get filled up with fear, as he would then get a flashback to when Bakugo and Deku were about in 7th grade. This is when Bakugo would basically remember, as his life was pretty much a living paradise up until 7th grade. Bakugo had literally everybody telling him he was going to be the greatest, he was going to be this, he was going to be that. Everybody would always just kind of act like Bakugo was all this and all that, but in reality Bakugo's kind of just extremely stuck up, and that's really the reality of the situation. That being said, Deku would basically walk in one day when they're in 7th grade. Bakugo would be in the back of the class smiling, talking to a bunch of friends, and Deku would just walk in as Bakugo just like, looks like we got some fresh meat. As he would basically look at Deku's direction, Deku would glare at Bakugo on this day, and Bakugo would glare at him, as Deku would sit down and Bakugo would immediately try to bully Deku. But it just wouldn't go well, because when Bakugo tries to, this version of Deku had a rough childhood. Deku in this version of events grew up with a huge attitude problem and ignorance. Deku has incredibly high anger problems due to the nature of his quirk, which is enhanced ignorance. I don't know if you guys watch RDC World 1, but you know, it's something like that. That being said, Deku would basically just get a little angry as Bakugo would start talking smack to Deku. Deku basically was standing up as Bakugo was on his desk and he was just talking smack to Deku. Deku proceeded to grab Bakugo's head and slam him into the desk, just leaving him a permanent scar on Bakugo's forehead, which he would rub, and then Bakugo would just kind of end the flashback. As it's at this point that you guys are probably like, yo, so did Deku grow up in the same neighborhood? And to put that bluntly, Deku did not come from his usual roots. In this version, Deku grew up in a bad neighborhood, and his father wasn't around. In this version, Hisashi's nothing but a deadbeat, and so Deku grew up in the Hosu City, a horrible part of town to be said, and Deku basically grew up with horrible tendencies stuck with him. His mother and father lived inside of some gang affiliation life, and therefore Deku was kind of always around the wrong crowd, forcing Deku to not only have a quirk, which kind of just already makes Deku have a bad start, but Deku just lives in a bad area. It doesn't really help with what his quirk basically does. That being said, this is when Deku would grow up basically more tough than he is in the original canon of events, and this would basically lead to Deku not having that same kind-hearted nature that he has in the original. That being said, Deku would still of course want to become a hero, however, it wouldn't be for the same reasons as our original Deku. He would have wanted to become a hero because he wants money. He simply just wants to make enough bread to get his family and himself out of the gutters, and Deku just kind of lives like that. That being said, class would end and Bakugo would just be getting his stuff as he's talking to his friends. This is when Deku would stand up and shove Bakugo with his shoulders. He would walk out of the classroom, and this is when Bakugo would just give Deku a stare, to which Deku would look back and say, "You gonna do something about it? Do it now." As Deku would have his back turned to Bakugo, he would then chuckle and say, "That's what I thought. That's what I thought, pussy." As Bakugo would look at Deku, he would then be like, "Ugh," and this is when Deku would walk away. It's at this point that Deku would basically begin to walk home. However, at this point in time, Deku would basically decide to take a little bit of a shortcut. This would lead to the Sludge villain stuff happening and Deku basically getting caught off guard by the Sludge villain. However, in this version of events, instead of Deku feeling fear and an overwhelming sense of death, Deku instead would feel overwhelmed with a feeling of rage, which would explode in a black energy which would go out in every direction, and Deku would release so much energy, kinetic energy that is, that the Sludge villain would basically splatter. In case you guys are wondering, Deku's quirk basically allows him to convert anger and energy around him into power. He enhances all of his stats multiple times, and Deku also has the ability to release it once it accumulates too much. This was 15 years of accumulation, so Deku has a whole lot of it, and after he splattered the Sludge villain everywhere, he kind of just tightened his backpack up again by the straps, got his water bottle out, drank some water, seeing as that kind of took a little bit out of him, and began to walk home. This is when about 20 seconds would go by and Deku would have turned the corner by now. As All Might would not see the Sludge villain, he would continue to go back into the sewer, and the Sludge villain would actually end up getting away in this version, seeing as All Might didn't see any trace of the Sludge villain. That being said, this is when Deku would begin the 10 months of training, where we are now going to be picking off on a new little tiny story arc. This is when about 1 month into the 10-month training arc, Deku would have been at the mall, as it's on this particular day that Inko would have gave him a little bit of extra cash to buy himself a new pair of sneakers. Deku would have gone to his local Foot Locker, and of course he would have ended up picking himself up a new pair of Air Forces. These aren't his usual white ones. This time, Deku decided that he was going to do something a little different. He ended up buying some black Air Forces, and as soon as Deku just put his hands on them, he could feel an overwhelming sense of confidence after he felt them on his feet. This would lead to Deku buying them, and of course, he would feel some sort of dark energy resonating within him, as Deku would slowly start to have his muscles augmented, as his physique would go up by 2 times. And Deku at this point has a very buff ripped. He has a very buff physique. He has a sort of physique like, think Bakugo, except more muscle mass and height. So that's basically what Deku is pretty much built like. He's kind of built like an NBA player, not exactly Mirio, but like one of those like kind of lanky-ish but buff ones. That's kind of what Deku's built like. And Deku's at about 6'1" in terms of height, so he's pretty damn tall. That being said, Deku would basically end up just training and working out during the entirety of the 10 months. And after wearing those black Air Forces for a while, it would have ended up leaving more power within his body than he already had. And Deku would start reaching brand new levels, which he honestly could have never imagined he would have reached before. Deku's aura would have like a sort of black aura whenever he wears the shoes. And it seems as if there's some sort of support item to him, seeing as, well, they kind of augment his stats. So I mean, what else are you going to call them other than a support item, which is quite literally what they are. That being said, Deku would basically spend the next 10 months and just kind of be chilling. This is when Deku would basically finally arrive to the day where the quirk exam and stuff like that happens. Or no, not quirk exam, but entrance exam. And Deku would basically just be at the top, sitting in a seat, to which Bakugo would look at Deku, and Deku would look at him as he would say, "What? You got a staring problem?" And it's at this point that President Mike would be giving out the directions for the 0 pointer, to which Ito would basically raise his hand and be like, "Hey, it's kind of unprofessional if you guys forgot about the 0 pointer inclusion." President Mike would be like, "Dude, I was just about to get there." Then Ito would turn around and be like, "And you there, you've been talking to that kid this entire time. Be quiet." And after Deku hears that, a vein just pops out of his head as he just looks at Ida with a death stare, and he tells him to STFU. And in case you don't know what that means, it means shuts the front door, I guess, kind of. That being said, this is when President Mike would look at Deku and say, "Hey, participant number something something, please calm down. Let me get through this and you can release all your anger in a bit." As he would of course do that, and it's at this point that everybody would basically proceed to, well, just go outside to the mock training area. As this is when they would basically all just meet President Mike outside, and well, Deku would then look at Ida as Ida would proceed to walk over towards his direction. He would then put his hand over Deku's shoulder and tell him that wasn't very nice what he did back there. Deku would look at Ida and say, "Yeah, and you think that calling me out was?" Ida would then look towards Deku as he would push his glasses up, and he would then say that may not have been the perfect approach. However, he was a distraction to the people around him. And Deku would then look at Ida as he would say, "And how many other people said I was?" As Ida would say that many of them most likely didn't want to bother him. And Deku would say, "Alright then, so why should you?" As Ida would look at Deku, he would kind of stay silent, and Deku would look at him as he would say, "Listen, you say that again, and I'm gonna bust your teeth in." As he would proceed to walk away, however, Ida would grab Deku by the hand and tell him how dare he, as Deku would quite literally elbow him right in the jaw, breaking so many teeth in Ida's mouth. And Deku, at that point that he did that, the gate would basically open. As President Mike would say, "Go, go, go, there's no countdowns in a real battle." Deku would rush in and just start obliterating robots after robots, destroying everything that's within Deku's path. There was nothing that was safe, not people, not robots, nothing. Deku is quite literal menace to society. And Deku would go on an absolute rampage, to which Deku would end up racking up about 12,000 points, destroying every previous record that has ever been held in the history of UA's, well, time being open as a school. That being said, this is when Deku would basically proceed to see the 0 pointer. The 0 pointer would of course be released just like it was in canon, and this is when everybody from all directions would start running away from that area immediately. Deku would lift his head up after destroying his 12,000th robot, and this is when Deku would see the giant monstrosity before him. Deku would see it as he would smile and say, "Finally, a worthy opponent." As Deku's aura would start to shine, a giant like a giant purplish black aura. Deku would look at it as he would smile, and he would form a grin as he would rush at the 0-pointer, and he would see Uraraka, who was about to get stepped on. However, right as the 0-pointer was about to, Deku would stand before the foot of the 0-pointer and Uraraka, and he would grab the foot as he would push the 0-pointer back so hard the 0-pointer quite literally fell right on its cheeks. Like, it fell right on the cheeks of the 0-pointer. As it's at this point, Uraraka would look up at Deku and say, "What?" This is when Deku was just, his strength would just be off the charts. And Deku would just breathe in as he would say, "This feels amazing." Uraraka would look at Deku and immediately say, "Can you help?" And Deku would look at her as he would say, "Help yourself." As he would throw the rubble off of her, Uraraka would then crawl away, and Deku would then get out of the school immediately. As Deku would just run away and say what a thrill that was, as he would just be happy. This man Deku would just be excited. And to this point, that Deku would basically proceed to go home, and this when he would arrive, he would finally see a note which is on the fridge. And this when Deku would see a note which actually says that she left his food in the fridge for once she gets back, and good luck. Deku would see the note and immediately smile as he would say, "Always working, aren't you, Mom?" As it's to this point that he would basically grab his food out the fridge, heat it up in the microwave, and basically just eat up for the day. As Deku would say that, well, I mean, if his mom's going to be working all day, he might as well have the house clean for her when she comes back. As Deku would start cleaning up the house for the next 3 hours, he would then pass out, and his Inko would finally arrive a couple of hours later, exhausted from work, with the food actually being ready for her, and still hot actually. Seeing as Deku had barely just passed out, and he had just barely finished whipping up some good delicious food for his mom. She would eat up and then pass out, and the very next day his acceptance letter to UA would of course arrive. Deku would be told that he ended up getting into UA, and that he displayed remarkable talent after destroying 1,200 robots. No, 12,000. I said 1,000. 12,000 robots. Deku showed remarkable marks in terms of the physical portion of the exam, and All Might just immediately tells Deku that, yeah, that's insane. Like, the man's goated. That being said, this is when Deku would basically decide that, well, he might as well go and, well, just kind of start working out. Deku would start working out when he would realize that he kind of is short on some essentials such as underwear and socks, some shorts and shirts, and Deku would decide that he's going to go out to the mall for a little bit of shopping. Deku at this point would go from store to store, and he would get his essentials. As it's to this point that Deku would finally be done with the shopping, he would be a little hungry, so he would decide to go to the food court, and he would actually end up just buying himself a little Subway or something like that, right? This is when there's a big group of kids, about 20 plus. Deku would be sitting down just eating his food, watching a YouTube video. He'd be watching Zether's new video as he's just like, huh? Zether posted what if Deku had the Speed Force? Check it out, link in the description. What? That's crazy. And Deku would just basically be like, wow, that's my favorite YouTuber. Like, that's crazy. Deku would then basically look at his phone as he would just start scrolling through the comments and see that there's a little pinned comment that says taking attendance. He would report his attendance and say that this man is just great, and that, you know, Zether's amazing. You know, he's handsome, he's cute, you know, he brings you guys the best content on YouTube. But no, I'm totally kidding though. But seriously though, you know, I'm done with self-plugging. But anyways, Deku would basically just be sitting there scrolling through Instagram, right, until the kids would basically start throwing popcorn at Deku. They would have just came out from watching a movie, Black Widow, and they would just start throwing popcorn, little pieces at Deku. They would throw kernels at him. Deku would not let this slide. As soon as the first one hits him, Deku would stand up and say, all right, which one of you little Fs did this? As they would all just kind of be like, and what are you going to do even if one of us speaks out? There's 20 of us and one of you. Deku would look at them as they would say, dude, there's a lot of things I can do to you. You don't want to find out. And one of the kids would stand up as he would say, it was me. Deku would look at the guy and he would then basically say, oh, well, at least you're owning up to it, you big freaking, you know, Pussy. The kid would look at him and just be like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? As Deku would look at him and say, oh, you want to know what I'm going to do about it? Deku would start growing in size and mass immediately. as Deku's eyes would turn a sort of pinkish, purplish aura with black in it, and Deku would then blitz the kid as he would punch him square in the jaw, breaking it completely, as the other kids would then stand up and all of them would power up their quirks. As they would start rushing at Deku, Deku would basically modder a 4th Shinobi Alliance their asses, and he would put them on the ground before they even realized what hit them. That being said, this is when Deku would basically get into a pretty giant mall fight, and a bunch of other people would then start fighting as well, as this is when a pro hero would come by. This hero being All Might, who was just so happened to be passing by the neighborhood. That being said, this is when Deku would basically get caught off guard by All Might, who comes up from behind him and punches him at the back of the head. As Deku would get knocked out, Deku would wake up, as he would actually wake up in an office. Deku would try to move, however he was restrained, and this is when a chair would turn around in front of him. This person being Nezu. This one Deku would say, "Who the hell are you?" As Nezu would look at him and say, "Ah, Midoriya. Been meaning to have you wake up for quite some time now." As he would say, "Would you like some tea?" Deku would look at Nezu as he would say, "No, I don't want some tea. I want you to get me out of here." As Nezu would just look at him and be like, I'm afraid I can't do that." This is when he would begin to explain to Deku that under normal circumstances, he would immediately be thrown in jail. However, he destroyed 12,000 robots in the robot portion of the exam, and there is no way they're just going to let some talent like that rot in jail for the rest of his life. So this is when Nezu would look at Deku and say, "Alright, look, here's the deal. You need to be into school. Because if someone doesn't put you down the right path, you might end up going astray and becoming a villain or something like that. And we cannot have that as a hero school. So we will be helping revoke the charges that were put against you by the families of the kids. And we will be, of course, accommodating your family with financial aid if you agree to join." As Deku would hear that financial aid, he would then say, "Wait, so you'd be willing to help my family if I join your school? And you're going to clear my charges?" He would say, "Seems to me like this is a pretty clear-cut decision." He would look at Nezu and say, "When do I start?" As Nezu would say, this Monday. Deku would look at him and be like, "I'll be there then." As to this point, the Deku would basically walk out of the building, and All Might would kind of give Deku a little bit of a glare. As after Deku walks out the door, All Might would talk to Principal Nezu and ask him if that was the wisest of decisions. To which Nezu would explain to Deku that it definitely is. That if it hadn't have been for the fact that Deku was caught off guard by that punch of his, and he didn't go all out on it, he may have lost that battle. And All Might would kind of shake at the thought of that. Just some kid by the age of 15 being able to obliterate him that easily, there's no way. Or at least All Might would be thinking that there's no way. That being said, this is when Deku would begin to train even harder than he ever would before, and Deku would start basically getting stronger and stronger. As it's at this point that the forces increase to his multiplier in terms of power, and his base would go up to 4 times a multiplier, seeing as Deku now has more pent-up anger. Plus, the day that he was at the mall fight, Deku wasn't even wearing the black Air Forces. Deku quite literally went in some slides, some shorts, white socks, the normal, athlete outfit. That's basically what Deku was wearing. And yeah, that being said, this is when basically the first day of UA would happen. As everybody would be in class, Aizawa would tell them all that, it took them too long to quiet down. Bakugo would notice Deku and get pretty angry by that. And it's at this point that Deku would basically proceed to look at Bakugo, as Bakugo would kind of just look away from Deku, seeing as he can't really look Deku in the eye. Every time that he does, he kind of just feels weak in a sense. And Deku would kind of have a little bit of a alpha mentality, I guess you could say, That being said, this is when Bakugo would basically walk up to Deku as he would say, "So, how are you planning to become a hero, Deku, with that little attitude of yours?" Deku would listen to those words come out of Bakugo's mouth, as he would quite literally punch Bakugo square in the face. Right as Aizawa saw, Aizawa would have barely been able to turn off Deku's quirk before he could have done even more damage. However, that punch would have stung just as bad as it did from the first time he ever remembered it. And Bakugo would hold his jaws. He's just like, ugh. As it's at this point that Deku would basically look at him and be like, "Looks like somebody needs to teach you a lesson." And it's at this point that Aizawa would look at Deku with those eyes. As Deku would look at Aizawa, he would immediately get heated, as he's just like, "You erased my quirk, didn't you?" Aizawa would then look at you and say one more of those outbursts, and before he could even finish that sentence, Deku would rush at Aizawa. As Aizawa would shoot the scarf right at Deku, Deku would grab it with one hand. As he would yank Aizawa towards his direction, Deku would then grab Aizawa by the throat, to which Aizawa would kick Deku's knee in, as he would bash it in, and Deku's knee would then fall to the ground, as Deku would be on one knee and Aizawa would then kick him away. It's at this point that Deku would get angrier and angrier. As Deku's leg would revert back to how it was, it would bend out of its weird discontorted dimensions, and it would then go back to a normal knee. As Deku would basically look up at Aizawa and say, "You probably shouldn't have done that." As it's at this point that his aura would start to feel heavy, and everybody would see as Deku just loses his self. He rushes at Aizawa and just begins to beat on the man relentlessly. Completely relentlessly. This is when the heroes would basically start coming out, as they would see a bloodied and battered Aizawa on the ground. He looked like the man looked like he needed saving, because I mean, Deku was just a straight menace at this current point, and he was not about to stop for any reason or anything at all. Matter of fact, Deku was on a different energy on this particular day. And with that being said, this is when more and more heroes would finally begin to basically arrive. This one, All Might would finally arrive on the scene, and it's at this point that Deku and All Might would finally get their rematch. As it's at this point that I'm 24 minutes and 39 seconds in. However, if you want to see how this fight plays out, you can basically watch the gameplay, which I will have in the background at this part. I'm going to be playing some One's Justice in the background, so in case you guys want to see how the All Might versus Deku fight goes down, definitely watch the gameplay, as it's kind of going to be a little bit of a visual representation. That being said, Deku would pretty much whoop All Might, and it gets to the point where Deku is just doing All Might just way too dirty. He is whooping this man beyond anything that All Might ever thought he would ever get whooped. I mean, All Might was getting punched and thrown around like he was some sort of ragdoll. And All Might, being the big chunky dude that he is 1000% not used to getting thrown around in the way that he is. At this rate, Deku's aura would get even more and more powerful, and people would finally begin to feel terror as they would look at Deku. More pro heroes would get called, and this is when Midnight would take off most of her clothes, as the pheromones from her body would begin to slowly calm Deku down as a sort of sedative, as more pros would begin arriving, such as Endeavor, Best Genius, Hawks, Gang Orca, and all of the top pro heroes in the world would basically start arriving at UA, as the battle would rage on for hours on end. I would say 5 or 6, with Deku not stopping at all, and the toxin of Midnight would finally start to kick in, as Deku would feel those effects and he would drop down to the ground, as it's at this point that Deku would get apprehended and put into prison. Deku would get placed into a jumpsuit, and he would then go into a cell, in which he would see a man which actually seems pretty giant. The man would then look at Deku and say, "What are you in here for?" Deku would explain his charges and how he fought against All Might himself, and the man would then look at him and say, "You don't look so tough without your quirk, kid. So if you want to survive in here, you just gotta make sure you stay out of my way." Deku would look at the man, give him a sort of a side stare, as he would turn his head to the side and just be like, "Who are you talking to like that, boy?" Deku would look at him as he would punch him straight in the gut, literally poking a hole straight through the man's entire abdominal area. And this is when Deku would see a black mist begin to appear before him. Okay, we pick up our story where we had last left off. Deku would see Kurogiri from the corner of his eye, and he would then smile as he would think, "So, you come to pick me up so soon, huh? Couldn't let me stay in here for a while after you saw what I did, could you?" As Kurogiri would say, "My master has requested to see you." He would say, "Will you come?" As Deku would say, "What does it look like? Does it look like I want to stay in here?" As Kurogiri would kind of nod his head in like any way. I mean, he can't really nod his head, but you know what I mean. Kurogiri would kind of nod his head. As Deku would step right in the portal, Deku would then arrive right before All For One. As immediately All For One would look at Deku's direction, and he would immediately begin to clap and say, "If it isn't the boy made of miracles, you single-handedly defeated the symbol of peace, as well as countless of the nations of Japan's best pro heroes. And you fought for a total of what was it, 4 or 5 hours was it again? As Deku would look at All For One, he would say, you know damn well what the answer to that question is. It was 5. All For One would look at him as he would chuckle under the mask, and he would then say, right. Anyways, you're not here to hear about how great you are. I propose an offer for you. You can either rot in jail for the rest of your life, or you can do something about these great abilities that you have. Join me, and by my side, we will become the most powerful beings on this planet. Not a single person will tell us what to do. Not a single person will tell us where we can do things. We will be gods among men. Deku would look at All For One as he would smile, and All For One would proceed to continue praising Deku, as he would tell him that alone he was able to accomplish so much. Now just imagine what he can do with him by his side, an entire army by his side. He was able to go toe to toe with All Might, something that not even he was able to do when he attempted it. Deku would chuckle and say, so, think you're about as strong as All Might, do you? Deku would say, looks like I'll have to put you to the test sometime. All For One would chuckle and say, is that a yes? And Deku would look at him as he would say, looks like I don't really got a choice, right? I guess it's a yes, but don't get your hopes up too high. As he would walk past All For One, he would say, now, where am I going to be staying? He would lean by the wall, and he would then see a couple of rooms in the hallway, as well as a laboratory. Deku would walk inside of the lab, and this is when he would see a doctor. Spoiler warning, he would see Dr. Ujiko in his lab, as Deku would say, huh. You know, it's funny. Aren't you that same man that told me I was going to be quirkless when I was a child? The man would look at Deku as he would chuckle and say, your power is in a quirk. You have something far more special. That day I was trying to take you from your mother, but it seems as if I wasn't going to be needed for that, now was I? Deku would chuckle as he would then grab the doctor by the throat and say, if you would have ever tried to lay a hand on me, I would have put you 6 feet underground that very same day. All For One would grab Deku by the shoulder and say, now, we wouldn't want to hurt our subordinates, now would we? As Deku would look at All For One and say, I guess not. He would drop him, and it's at this point that basically while all this is basically happening, it would become public news that Deku would have basically been fighting with pro heroes for hours on end, and that, well, Deku just completely went off the rails. Like, Deku not only did all the things that happened, but he literally broke out of prison, and this would just go widespread. It would be all over the news. People would be finding out all over the world, and people of Japan would start freaking out, like, All Might, our symbol of peace, defeated by a child. And Inko would be in tears as she would be thinking about what her baby is doing. I mean, yeah, maybe he wasn't around the best environment growing up, and maybe she wasn't the best mother she could have been, but she never thought that something like this would be the life that her son would lead. They changed the place that they live for Deku to have a better chance, for Deku to not end up like her, working 3 jobs to finally make ends meet. But Deku had other plans. This is when Deku would tell All For One that he cannot live this life without his mother, so he needs him to take care of that for him. All For One would smile as he would say, it shall be done. And the very next day, Inko would get kidnapped, as she would then be transported to another place, given a separate identity as well as all the money she would need for the rest of her life. And she would also be given a letter to which Deku would have wrote for her, telling her that he's sorry for where things are going to be going now, however that she'll be living a great life by herself. And Inko would just tear up as she would see that message and, well, never be seen again. This is when Deku would start to become All For One's golden boy. Shigaraki is great. He's Nana's grandson and all. And yeah, maybe his quirk has potential to be great. However, Deku is on a completely different level. If that power is honed to its utmost upper limit and it is trained in the proper way, his quirk has limitless potential. And All For One can see that. Anyone who isn't blind can see that. And All For One, he's gonna take full well advantage of Deku. That being said, this is when Deku's training would start. And during the time that Deku would be training, Shigaraki would take note of Deku. He would have a very clear disdain for Deku off rip, just due to the fact that his master is seen praising somebody other than him. that seems to rub Shigaraki in the wrong way, and he makes that very clear. However, one day when Deku was training, just punching a boxing bag, he would have ended up ripping through his 5th one in the week, as Deku would be punching through one that is compressed of full steel within it, and the bag is made of some material which is extremely difficult to rip. However, Deku would just clear this boxing bag. Shigaraki would come in, as Deku would have hung up the next level to his training, and he would proceed to decay the bag that Deku was about to use. Deku would take off the gloves, and he would then say, "You know what, I've been meaning to pick a bone with you. What's your problem, boy? You seem to have a big problem with me, don't you? Why don't you do something about it?" Shigaraki would proceed to look at Deku as he would get an evil grin on his face, and he would then rush at Deku as he would say, "You stole my master." Deku would look at Shigaraki and say, "No, I didn't steal him from you, but I will soon," as Deku would punch Shigaraki square in the jaw, completely dislocating it. Deku would sweep Shigaraki's leg, and Deku would start to basically bash his head in with a metal bat. Shigaraki would be left in an unconscious, bloody state, as Dr. Ujiko would have to rush Shigaraki into the doctor's office and have to basically heal him immediately with the best quirks that he has available to himself. Shigaraki would have even had to have gotten some metal parts implanted, and All For One would have been very upset with Deku. He would tell him why he hurt his student, as Deku would say that he started it. He tried to decay him. All For One would look at Deku and say, looks like his services will no longer be needed. He would look at Dr. Ujiko as he would tell him that it's time, as he would walk over to Shigaraki's body and steal the quirk of Decay from Shigaraki. This is when Deku would look at All For One and say, "We have a new successor." He would put his hand over Deku's forehead, and Deku would fall onto his knees, as the pain that he would feel from getting a quirk transferred would be tremendous. All For One would be smiling, as Deku, after having all the pain end after a brief 10 seconds, would feel invigorated. The power of a quirk coursing through his veins is so utterly powerful. This quirk Decay without any limit, and without without Shigaraki's body. Someone who can properly use it, it's an absolute monstrous quirk. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the manga, but if you have, you know Decay's potential. That being said, Deku is going to be utterly broken. And Deku, well, you know, he's going to be very aware of that. That being said, All For One would not only have granted Deku Decay, but he would have also ended up granting him other quirks, such as an enhancement quirk and a speed quirk. Deku's body, you may be like, yo, how is he supporting all of these quirks? Dude, Deku has Black Air Force energy, bro. Deku quite literally has no regard for anybody's life around him, and Deku is just a Black Air Force, bro. Like this man is dangerous. He's a menace to society. That being said, this is when Deku would continue with his training, and this is when Stain, the hero killer, would be recruited. The day of the Nomu incident would have of course happened, not the USJ, seeing as Shigaraki was taken care of beforehand. The UA school festival would happen a little bit on the same time, seeing as they didn't have the 1 week break, and well, school would have gone shut down for a week on the period of time which Deku finally gets the heroes. Sorry boys, I'm a little tired since, you know, I'm kind of used to passing out at around 10, so even though I said it's 9, most of you guys are probably like, that's amateur stuff. I go to sleep at 5 and I wake up at 7. But you know, me, I'm kind of used to going to sleep early and waking up early as well, because you know, school just started for me, which is why I'm barely giving you guys 1 video a day. If it wasn't for school, I'd probably be pumping up maybe 3 or 2 by this point. But you know, that aside, this is when Deku would continue his training, and Stain would begin to train Deku in, well, the art of the sword, as well as hand-to-hand combat, and refining Deku's already great combat prowess. Deku would continue to train with Stain. However, Deku would find that swords are not really his thing. Deku would ask All For One to try a different weapon out, something that he was never allowed to use at the hero school. He wants to try advanced weaponry. And if you get what I'm saying, he's trying to use that strap. Deku's trying to use the strap. He's trying to be, you know, he's trying to be strapped up with the little some on his waist, right? And yeah, Deku basically proceeds to get a little weapon of sorts that Deku is definitely going to be using a lot later on. That being said, Deku would continue with his training and such, and Deku would get even more powerful as the days go on. This is when, of course, UA would have barely been getting over their whole entire situations. The Nomu incident would be happening, and at this current point, they would be having the forest training arc begin. This is when Deku would basically be training with All For One, and this is when Deku would walk into Dr. Ujiko's office after a long day of training. He would ask Dr. Ujiko what exactly he does in this lab and what are those creatures within the tubes. The doctor would look at Deku and say that doesn't concern you. As Deku would quite literally flash what he has on his waist, the doctor would look at him and say, you wouldn't hurt me even if you wanted to. All For One would tear you limb from limb. Deku would look at the doctor as he would say, I'm more powerful than he will ever be. More powerful than All Might will ever be. That man, he's nothing but scum, a pebble on the road of greatness which I am on. And you are going to tell me right now what is in those tubes. As Dr. Ujiko would look at Deku, he would step back as he would fall onto the ground, and Deku would aim the pistol right on Dr. Ujiko's head as he would say, now talk. Deku would aim it at his head as this is when he would finally begin to squeal. As Deku would say, very interesting project you seem to be working on. Very soon I'm going to be needing you to work on something very similar on my body. I need to become the ultimate machine of destruction and chaos. This world will be under my control, and I will have the world on the palm of my hand. There will be nobody who will be able to stop me. Not even All Might, not the heroes, and definitely not Midnight or Aizawa. Those two are the ones who made me get put in this position to have to be here. But no more. Tonight, that's all gonna change. This is the night where the forest training stuff would basically be going on. And it's at this point that, well, right now, All Might would basically be going through a lot of stuff, seeing as well a student was literally able to he was able to run the ones with All Might, bro. Like, this man was literally able to run the ones with All Might and beat him. So people are just terrified of what's to come, and the students are on high alert, meaning that it'll be a lot harder to get to the forest training arc this time. That being said, this is when they would be wondering what's up with Deku, and All Might and the rest of the people, seeing as they still don't know about the League of Villains, would not exactly even be the wiser to what Deku has happened going on, or who even broke Deku out of jail. That being said, this is when Deku would basically proceed to arrive to the forest, to the forest place with the Vanguard Action Squad. And this is when all hell would break loose. They would proceed to go absolute ham on all of the bystanders, all of the students, all of the animals in the forest, and immediately Dabi would set the forest ablaze as many animals would begin to run around. This is when Koda would notice the weird aura around the air as he would realize and tell everybody what's going on. Aizawa, All Might, the Wild Pussycats, everybody would be on high alert due to the fact that, well, they know what's coming. It's Deku. And Bakugo would get filled with fear as he would hear that name. Deku. Before, he was scared of Deku, yeah. But before, Deku was nothing but a man. There was a point in time where Bakugo would believe that maybe, with just enough training, he could catch up to All Might. But now, All Might is just a stepping stool to what Deku might have became. And All Might definitely trained as well, so All Might is even more powerful than the one that we had in the original canon that fought against All For One. Even more strength is within that frail body of a man that All Might had. He had exactly 1 month to train. Actually, I believe it was 2 months before the UA, the sports festival and the forest training arc stuff ended up happening. So I'm just gonna say 2 months, right? All Might had a bit of time to train his body up and learn some martial arts. So, that being said, they would all go in there, and this is when all hell would break loose. Immediately, an all-out war between both sides. The heroes, the villains would start to ensue as Dabi would immediately rush at Todoroki. He would take care of ruining Todoroki's life and Endeavor's greatest possession. Todoroki, his final product, the thing that endeavors strive for so much, perfection, the son that was supposedly going to defeat the symbol of peace someday. He's gonna rip every shred of hope that man once had, and nothing will stand in his way of that. That being said, Toga, the followers of Stain himself would handle the wild cats, and this is when they would all just go out on an all-out battle. It's to this point that Aizawa would actually end up being handled by none other than Kurogiri. Kurogiri would teleport behind Aizawa, put him through a portal, and teleport him right before Deku and All For One. He would immediately deactivate both of their quirks, and this is when Deku would kick Aizawa straight in the jaw, sending him crashing away at the wall, saying, "You think I need a quirk to beat you? You know, my powers aren't some sort of quirk that can be turned on and off. That little thing that you did to me before, that was a placebo effect. I thought I was getting weaker due to the fact and the nature of your quirk, but now I see that I'm greater than that. I'm a god." Deku would look at Aizawa as he would say, "And there's no one who's gonna get in my way. Not you, not Midnight, and definitely not All Might." He would rush at Aizawa as he would immediately snap his neck, and this is when he would end up handling the greatest threat that stood before him. Now, the only one that could potentially rival Deku is Midnight. And it's at this point that Deku would basically have a very familiar sight crashing down from the sky. It was All Might. All Might would come flying in from the skies as he would land right before All For One and Deku. He would look at Deku as he would say, "Listen, young Midoriya, you do not have to do this. You were spared once before, you will be spared again. However, you will need to face consequences for your actions. Come back, young Midoriya. You have a future as a hero. You do not need to become this villain. Don't let that man warp your sense of justice. You had a sense of justice. You saved that girl. Please, tell me that some of that still lives within you." Deku would look at All Might as he would walk over to him and say, I think you're full of it," as he would punch All Might square in the gut, sending a hole straight through All Might's gut. All Might would fall to his knees as he would say, and Deku would then look at All Might as he would chuckle as All For One and Deku would stare right before All For One, right before All Might. As Deku would look at All For One would say, "Allow me." Deku would say, "Certainly." And it's at this point that All For One would pierce All Might straight through the heart with his tendrils, the black ones that he uses against All Might in the normal fight. This is when Deku would be standing right behind All For One, as Deku would pierce All For One straight through the heart, and All For One would turn towards Deku's direction as he would say, "Why? You could have been a king. You could have ruled this world alongside me." And Deku would look at All For One as he would begin to laugh. He would laugh hysterically as he would say, "Now, you're funny, man. Why would I work for you and be a pawn to you when your entire army could be mine? When I could take control of the entirety of Japan? And why stop there? I can take control over the entirety of this pathetic earth. Everybody will bow down to me, and I will be the supreme ruler of this world. There will be nobody and nothing which will be able to stand in my way. And people like you, they'll be a memory of the past. There will be nobody alive in my utopia which will be able to stand in my way. And there will be nothing but chaos, where the strong will strive and the weak will perish. That is a perfect world." As Deku would laugh hysterically, he would then look at All For One as he would stomp his head in, and this is when Deku would just start laughing maniacally, as he would rush in there and he would begin to go insane, going on a complete rampage on all of the students, and each and every single one of the heroes would just be completely GG'd. Deku would look at the villains as he would say, "You're all under brand new management, and whoever has something to say about it, speak up now." This is when Toga would have actually been one to say, "We're not going to listen to you. You're about my age as well. Why should I listen to you?" Deku would immediately proceed to blitz her and just crush her head in with with both of his hands. He would have quite literally blitzed her right in front of her, and with both of his arms, he would have just crushed Toga's skull right into itself. As people standing around him, including Stain, would just back up, as they would immediately just see that Deku is on a completely different level. This is when a brand new era, an era of Black Air Force energy would be. I can't even believe that I'm doing this. An era of Black Air Force energy would begin, and Deku would become the ruler of this new society.
And that concludes the ending to What If Deku Had Black Air Force Energy. If you guys enjoyed any part of this story, make sure to go down below and hit that red button, and also turn those post notifications so you guys are updated on any future videos. That said, it has been your boy Zether. I love each and every single one of you guys, and I am out. Peace.